Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit LegacyPMInvestments.com. That's LegacyPMInvestments.com.
On Jenna Ellis tonight, a Republican presidential nominee supporting tariffs? What are we to make of Donald Trump's trade plan shared during the debate last week? Stephen Moore, an economist with the Heritage Foundation, joins us. Now, conservative nationalists are making big gains in England and France. Is this a moment for them? Could we call it Make France Great Again? Tractor Supply is rejecting DEI programs after being exposed for embracing a leftist agenda. Rancher Richard Holtforf explains why middle America just won't accept this woke baloney anymore. And Will Chamberlain, counsel at Article 3 Project, helps us understand how the U.S. Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity is a major win for Donald Trump. Be sure to tune in to Jenna Ellis tonight. Welcome to Jenna Ellis tonight. My name is Jeff Hunt, and I'm filling in for Jenna. I'm a radio host on the Salem Media Network in Denver, Colorado. Let's dive into the issues and news that matter most to you right here, right now. Did you see Donald Trump talk tariffs during the debate? Check this video out.
You want to impose a 10% tariff on all goods coming into the U.S. How will you ensure that that doesn't drive prices even higher?
It's not going to drive them higher. It's just going to cost countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China. It's going to just force them to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things.
Stephen Moore is a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation and co-founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Stephen, thanks so much for joining the Jenna Ellis Tonight Show.
Thanks so much for having me. Pleasure to be with you.
Stephen, I'm a little confused. I thought conservatives were against tariffs, and now you have the Republican nominee for president saying that they'd be good for our country. Can you help me understand, would tariffs be good for America?
Well, you know, I've worked with Donald Trump now for 8 years, and I don't always agree with every proposal that Donald Trump comes up with. I think he's done amazing things when he was president to rebuild the American economy, and I certainly hope that he gets into office and can do it again. Look, a 10% across-the-board tariff would raise money for the government to reduce our deficit or to cut other taxes. And one of the things Donald Trump has said is that he's going to use some of that money to reform our tax system and reduce our income taxes and other taxes. So if it were a trade of, an import tax for reducing other taxes, I could live with that. But I'm a free trade guy, and I think Donald Trump is too. I think he understands that, the United States as the hub of the world economy really benefits from trade. But I also think that China is a special case, and I think it's important that we, since China does not play by the rules and that they become more of a threat to American economic and national security, a tariff on China may make some good sense.
Yeah, help me understand how China doesn't play by the rules with regards to trade. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, they steal our technology. They are involved in predatory trade practices. They manipulate their currencies in ways that hurt American workers. And Trump has made this case, by the way, since he first came down that escalator back in 2015 and announced he was running for president. And we need a president who gets tough with China. They are a menace, both economically and also with respect to what they're doing in terms of they're building up their military. But I got to tell you, when I talk to businessmen and women who do international business that are in the United States, they are very concerned that China steals our technology, they steal our patents. That's not playing by the rules.
Yeah, I've always looked at tariffs a little bit like I do minimum wage, that businesses aren't going to just eat the cost of these. They're going to pass the costs on to the consumer. So if we add a tariff to items that we import here to the United States, isn't that just going to make everything more expensive?
I knew you were going to ask me that question, and that's an issue of great debate right now about whether that tariff would raise prices or not. And I'm not so sure about it. I could argue both sides of the equation. On the one hand, it is like a sales tax; it makes things more expensive, and so in that case, it would make things more expensive when you go to the grocery store or buy certain things online. On the other hand, if you use the tax to reduce other taxes, then it could be a wash, in other words, in terms of the prices. So I'm not sure we know the answer to that question. But don't forget, Trump wants to make his tax cuts permanent, and maybe we could pay for that by this 10% across the board tariff. And in that case, I think it would reduce prices. I want to remind your viewers and listeners that when Trump was president, we didn't have inflation. The inflation rate averaged 2%. In his last months in office, the inflation rate was less than 1.5%. And my God, we had the most incredible period of growth and also low prices. And then Biden came in. That's the irony of the Biden people saying Trump's policy is going to cause inflation. Wait a minute. The average inflation rate was 2% when Trump was in office and 6.5% when Biden came into office. So how in the world is Trump the one to world to worry about when it comes to inflation? I guarantee you, if Biden continues with these massive spending policies, we are going to continue to see rising prices at an elevated level.
Now, Stephen Moore, I'm going to give you the Jenna Ellis magic princess wand. All right. You get to do whatever you want with the Trump administration when he's elected in November. What are some key steps you think President Trump in his second term can do to address this inflation?
Well, look, I'm not telling you anything most of your viewers know, that Trump, the first thing out of the gate is we're going to start producing as much American energy as we can. And that includes our nuclear power, our oil, our gas. Let's not forget, we have more coal than any other country in the world. We have clean coal in the United States. And that would be huge because remember, we were only paying about $2.99 a gallon or less when Trump was president. Then it went up to $4 a gallon when Biden came in because he wouldn't build the pipelines, wouldn't build the refineries, he even said, I'm going to kill the oil and gas industry because he hates fossil fuels. So anytime you bring down the energy price, the price of everything else goes down as well. The next thing we'll do, as I said, is make Trump's tax cuts permanent so that businesses have an incentive to invest here in the United States and not build factories in Mexico and in Europe and China and other places. The third thing that we're going to do is take away some of these incredibly expensive regulations that Biden has imposed on the economy. We believe that the average household pays about $5,000 a year more. It's like a tax because of regulation. So there are enormous things that we can do to get this economy moving again in a big way without inflation.
And a lot of it comes down to business confidence as well. I was looking at last week's Chevron deference decision, which is really a decision about regulation as it relates to businesses and to individuals and who makes the rules. You're an economist. You're connected with the business community. When you saw that decision come down last week as it relates to Chevron deference, was there a sense of optimism among the business community in this country?
Well, let me put it like this. Anyone who believes in the spirit of the Constitution and the framework of our Constitution that was written in 1787 should celebrate this decision. I read the New York Times the other day. Oh, my God, this is going to mean we're going to have dirty air and dirty water and unsafe workplaces, and people are going to die because we're not going to have the regulations. And everybody's for safe water and safe air, and everybody wants to make our financial system safe and so on. But we've gone so overboard with the regulatory state, and I think everybody knows that. And what has happened over the course of the last 40 or 50 years is that these regulations are not being, and these are basically laws that are not being passed by Congress. Remember, we have three branches of government. We have a legislative branch, that's Congress. We have an executive branch, that's the president. and the executive branch carries out the laws. It doesn't make the laws. And then the third one, of course, is the court system, and they interpret the laws. What has happened under the regulatory state, I call it the regulatory octopus, is that you have these unelected bureaucrats in these regulatory agencies, from the FDA to the FDIC to the FTC to the CFTC. I could go on. Dozens and dozens of these agencies that are accountable to no one, and they're making laws. They're the judge, the jury, the executioner. They even have their own court systems at these agencies. It's outrageous. And all the Chevron case said was, yes, of course we need wise and prudent regulation, but those regulations need to be passed by Congress. It is unconstitutional to have these unelected people making rules that affect trillions of dollars of the economy.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't understand how burdensome these regulations can be. I worked in higher education for about 8 years. We had so many rules that this small Christian university had to follow that at a certain point we were going to hire somebody just to help us make sure we followed all the rules, because the punishments when you don't follow the rules oftentimes can really saddle your company, your business, your educational institution with a lot of fines and things like that. So the ability to free up businesses, I think, is one of the greatest arguments that Donald Trump is going to make. So one last question I have for you, going back to tariffs, is Donald Trump trying to bring jobs and manufacturing back to the United States? And is tariffs a way for him to kind of help achieve that?
Well, certainly his biggest goal is to bring jobs, for the middle class. Let's face it. What's really changed in American politics over the last, say, 2 decades is it used to be the Republicans were sort of the party of the rich, remember? And then the Democrats were the party of the working class and the poor. Today, it's almost flipped on its head. The big source of votes for the Democrats are the rich elite in America. The people went to Harvard and Princeton and Yale, and the people with advanced degrees, and they're doing just fine in this economy. The people who've gotten screwed under Joe Biden's policies have been middle class, working class Americans. And so what you're seeing now is Trump has made the Republican Party the party of the working class and blue collar workers and people who work hard. And so this is really important for Trump to bring those jobs back. And, there is a demoralization going on in America today. People are concerned not just about the inflation, which is flattening families and making things unaffordable, but also just look at what's going on with our cities, what's happened in our cities. Our great cities have been ruined. Look at what's happening with the crime spree. Look at the fact that our border is out of control. Look what's happening on our college campuses. It's outrageous. And Americans feel like the whole American system is falling apart.
Stephen, I want to continue this conversation when we come back from a break. You're watching Jenna Ellis Tonight. Jeff Hunt filling in for Jenna. We'll be right back. My name's Jeff Hunt. I'm filling in for my good friend Jenna Ellis. I'm a radio host on the Salem Media Network in Denver, Colorado. Stephen Moore is a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation and co-founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. He's got a new op-ed out about the craziness happening in the green movement. Check this out. Climate change crazies has a new target, and it's more shocking than ever. Listen to this. A group of 13 teenagers sued Hawaii's government over its use of fossil fuels. Environmental law firms, Our Children's Trust, and Earth Justice claim that Hawaii's natural resources are imperiled by CO2 emissions. Even if that were true, shouldn't they be suing China? The settlement will require the state to eliminate fossil fuels from its transportation system by 2025. And it goes on, after recent flooding in Vermont, green activists sued the state for not abolishing fossil fuels, and Massachusetts is suing Exxon Mobile for, yes, you guess it, the weather, adverse weather conditions. Stephen Moore, what is with the lunacy of the radical environmentalists?
Well, there's a lot to this story, but let's just start with Hawaii. So it's so ironic that what's going on here is that these teenagers literally 14, 15, 13 years old, sued the state. Now, of course, this was just a ploy by the radical environmentalists to find some kids to sue. And they won. They won in the Hawaii court. And the Hawaii court says that the government has to stop using fossil fuels in Hawaii. And, you can't use oil, gas, coal. Well, the irony of this, of course, is that if you can't use oil, gas, and coal, wait a minute, the number one industry in Hawaii, obviously, is tourism. How are people going to get to Hawaii if they can't go on an airplane?
That was my first question. Are we going to sail there? Is like on wind? How are you going to even get to Hawaii? And most of the people that can afford to travel Hawaii are a little bit older in their lives, right? So they're not going to be sitting on a wind-powered sailboat for 6 weeks to try to get out there.
Yeah.
This just seems like absolute lunacy.
Yeah, and here, look, we kind of laugh at this, but it's a very serious thing because, as you mentioned, there are now something like 22 lawsuits all over the country by states and cities suing the oil and gas industry, saying you're hurting the economy, hurting the environment. But wait a minute. The oil and gas company is what provides, if you look at fossil fuels, we get 80% of our energy from fossil fuels. So what, you're going to shut down 80% of our energy? We wouldn't be doing this show right now. We wouldn't have our cars. We wouldn't have our industry. You would destroy the American economy. So when they talk about, we're going to get rid of fossil fuels, what they're really saying is, impoverish Americans. And I think you're going to see more of this because, look, they've struck out in Congress, the Green Movement. They've struck out with even Biden is starting to acknowledge his policies aren't working. We use more fossil fuels than ever because they're an efficient way to provide us healthy economy. By the way, they are because we have reliable electric power. It keeps us healthy. It keeps us prosperous. And it would be nutty to get rid of all of our fossil fuels.
Yeah, there's no country in history that has been wealthy and successful and not required fossil fuels, cheap energy to be able to get there. It just hasn't happened. But Stephen, look, this is something that's personal to me because I live in Colorado, and it's the blue state of Colorado right now. And climate change is like a religion. But truth be told, I don't think they really believe in it, because if they really believed in it, they wouldn't be heating their homes. They wouldn't be using air conditioning. They wouldn't be dressing themselves in Patagonia and driving their cars around. They heading up to the mountains to go hiking or skiing. So in many ways, I kind of feel like the climate change cult, they're a bunch of, they kind of hypocritical, aren't they?
Yeah. And by the way, if people don't want to use air conditioning or if people don't want to drive a car and so on, that's their own right as individuals. But what worries me is they want to take air conditioners and cars away from people like you and me who want to use them. And you think I'm joking, but Joe Biden he has a policy that says in 10 years, 12 years, you can't produce gas cars anymore. That's kind of crazy. And then you put your finger on the real issue here. If you're concerned about climate change, and we all are worried about what's happening to the weather of the planet, there has been a heating up of the planet slightly over the last 30 or 40 years, but nothing is going to change if China is by far the major polluter. Even if the United States didn't even exist as a country and all 350 million of us disappeared from the planet, it would have no effect on the amount of carbon in the atmosphere because China and India are producing 5 times more pollution than we are. That's why I put that line in that piece. Maybe those kids should be suing should be suing China, not Exxon Mobile.
And, I don't blame them. It's how poor countries become rich countries. You're never going to become a rich country relying on wind and solar, especially if you're Pakistan or India or China. No, they want to move their people into, middle class livelihood. They want that for their citizens. I don't really blame them. But of course, America is going to try to do this because it feels good. We think we're making a difference. Look, Stephen, I was a river guide for 5 summers. We had good water years. We had bad water years. But I think especially this younger generation, Stephen Moore, they believe that this is something that's a real threat to their future. What's your response to them?
Well, listen. Energy is the master resource. Everything that we have is derivative of cheap, abundant energy. Countries that have access to cheap and abundant energy, like the United States, get rich. Countries that don't, like many of the African countries, are poor. And it's almost immoral when our government goes into poor communities and poor countries and says, don't use oil and gas and coal. Well, wait a minute. That's going to make them less healthy, less prosperous. We should use all our resources. And incidentally, the United States of America over the last 10 years has reduced our carbon emissions more than any other country in the world. And you know how we did that?
Technological advancement.
Yes, and natural gas. It turns out that natural gas is a wonderful, and so we're using more natural gas. It's a clean burning fuel. Somebody's got to explain to me, why is the left against natural gas?
I don't get it. A lot of that hysteria doesn't make any sense to me. Stephen Moore, senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation.
Power.
I missed. Say that last part again, Stephen. You broke up a little bit.
Why against natural gas and nuclear power? Those emit very, nuclear power is the safest and cleanest form of energy, and they're against that too.
It's hysteria at the end of the day. They lock themselves in their rooms. They eat bugs. They're afraid to go outside. If you're a young person, embrace the technological advancements and the energy abundance that this country has. It will make you a better life. Don't hide in fear. Stephen Moore, senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation and co-founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Thanks so much for being on the Jenna Ellis Tonight Show.
No, it's been a real privilege. Thanks so much.
All right, when we come back, we're going to get into a whole lot of other issues, from what happened with Tractor Supply to responding to the U.S. Supreme Court decisions today and the French elections. We have so much to cover. Stay tuned. You're watching Jenna Ellis Tonight. Welcome back to Jenna Ellis Tonight. My name's Jeff Hunt, filling in for my good friend Jenna Ellis. Is there a new term, new phrase being shouted in France these days? Make France great again, possibly? Check out these headlines. While Le Pen could be about to take over France, Marine Le Pen and her national rally movement have already topped at the polls at the European elections this year, and now they also look to win France's snap legislative elections, with the first round held this weekend. Speaking directly to the French people's intensifying concerns about what many of them now see as a civilizational moment, Le Pen describes this phenomenon as the essavement, savification of French society. I'm going to bring in the author of this, Matthew Tyrmand, who's a Claremont Institute Lincoln Fellow. Matthew, thanks so much for being on the Jenna Ellis Show.
Great to be here, especially about this subject.
So,
green shoots.
Give us some insight. What's happening not only in France but in England as well? It seems like the conservative nationalists are doing pretty well these days.
Yeah. Well, as I told Fox News the other day, the French people, much like the people on the ground all over Europe, are mad as hell, and they're not going to take it anymore. France has been particularly beaten down by bad leftist, Eurocentrist, globalist policies on economics, migration, borders, devolution of their sovereign competences to Brussels. They have seen crime spike, youth unemployment spike, terror attacks spike, burning cars, no-go zones. It has gotten worse and worse and worse over 12 years. And now the French right, who was rather untouchable for almost a generation, Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who started the party, was an overt Holocaust denier. Well, they've gone mainstream. They won the European Union elections, which catalyzed Macron calling a snap election. And now they won the first round of this election. It's not over yet, because there is a second round. You will see the Macron sort of center squishy right get together with the leftists to make sure that that the legislature maintains 50+% not Le Pen. But the people are speaking quite loudly all over Europe. We saw it with Geert Wilders. We saw it with the Swedish Dems. And now we're seeing it in the UK as well. Nigel Farage, I think, is going to get 20% of the popular vote, crushing the Conservative Tories, which has led the UK for the last 14 years. The ministers and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak won't even win his seat back in Parliament, is my guess, on Thursday when they go to the polls on July 4th. So there's a reshaping of European right-wing politics in Brussels, in Paris, in Stockholm, in London, in Amsterdam, in Berlin with AfD, in Vienna with FPO. So it's continuing to move to the right despite the best efforts of the European Union establishment, the European elites in all these capitals. And even with what they just did with carving up Brussels' power post-European Union parliamentary elections, they still give it to their friends and shut out Meloni in Italy, shut out the right wing. So that only is going to further push the people to the right. So Europe is going back to a country of a continent of sovereign nations, God willing, because it's very necessary. I live there part-time, and let me tell you, it is really necessary. Sovereignty come back to Europe.
I know that the left wants to kind of paint this all as racism, those types of things. It's about kind of reclaiming the cultural traditions. It's nothing to do with race, but the idea of reclaiming the culture that made these countries great again. They could easily just make France great again.
Yeah, there is nowhere more so that there is a chauvinism that is embedded in French culture that is what we think of as Americans, of stereotypically French. You know, the idea of the Frenchman as being like France is the center of the world culturally. And the people do still feel that, but they've been demographically diluted by massive waves of migration, first from Algeria for generations, and then the floodgates opened by the EU the last 15 years. France, philosophically, having built the EU, willing to go along with that, just like we see here with the southern border. It is a Faustian bargain they make for electoral politics that hurts their economies, that hurts their safety and stability in their countries.
Tyrmand,
so we're seeing a
Claremont Institute Lincoln Fellow. We're just out of time. Thanks so much for joining Jenna Ellis tonight. We'll be right back to talk Tractor Supply and the reverse actions they're going with. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Jenna Ellis tonight. My name is Jeff Hunt, filling in for my good friend Jenna Ellis. Beep, beep, beep. Do you hear that sound? Well, that is the sound of Tractor Supply backing up. Check out this headline here. Tractor Supply retreats from DEI amid conservative backlash. Tractor Supply, a rural retailer that is known for selling animal feed and workwear, said it is done with corporate diversity and many environmental efforts, a striking reversal as more companies face criticism of these initiatives from conservative activists. It is eliminating all jobs focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and withdrawing its carbon emission goals. The retailer also said it is retiring its DEI goals and would stop sponsoring pride festivals for the LGBTQ community and voting campaigns ahead of the presidential election. Joining me on Jenna Ellis tonight is Richard Holtforf, who is a Colorado State representative and rancher. Richard, we saw Tractor Supply figure out they made a big mistake by embracing the woke agenda. Why is that a bad thing for Tractor Supply to do?
Well, I will tell you that the good thing that Tractor Supply is doing is listening to the voices out there of middle America and rural America, because we have no interest. We have no interest in hiring a chief diversity officer. We have no interest in this mess. 80% of Americans are not interested in the far left progressive agenda that's been peddled by the activists on that side. Now, thank God we have conservatives. Thank God we have voices that say enough is enough. Rural America has a belly full of this mess. We're done with it. We want services from Tractor Supply. We want products from Tractor Supply that we can use in the country to make a living. We don't care about this LGBT activism.
Richard, you're a rancher. How does DEI help you perform on your ranch? At the end of the day, this is about making money for you. This is about raising cattle. This is about raising crops. All this woke agenda, the DEI, the LGBTQ, it doesn't actually help ranchers. So did Tractor Supply wake up to that fact?
Well, there was an individual that helped Tractor Supply wake up, and it's, I believe, Mr. Randall Starbuck is his name. And thank God for his activism, his conservative, middle America activism, because he's the one that said enough's enough. We're going to go on the offense. And here's what I declared to you, sir, and everybody out there. America has had enough, and we need to go out and say, we're pushing back. We're done with you. It doesn't help ranchers any. Cattle don't care. On this ranch or this farm, if we have a chief diversity officer, it will not help feed the world. We cannot feed America with this woke mess. You can't get cheaper groceries in the grocery store with this distraction. And Tractor Supply got an earful because people are sick of it. They're wanting to be more woke, and now they're going broke.
Now, Bud Light was the one that kind of learned this the hard way, lost billions of dollars of market share, finally kind of had to try to find a way through all this. Has corporate America learned that you don't mess with your consumer base? Look, if this was a business in Boulder, Colorado, or downtown Denver, I'm sure you could be as woke as you want to be. But when your primary consumer are red-blooded, conservative Americans that live in the heartland of this country, maybe you should reevaluate embracing progressive leftist ideas.
Well, you shouldn't be looking to the far left to set your corporate policy, first of all. But here's the problem. The LGBT activists, they are out there trying to change society, change America, and they're attacking corporate America just like Jesse Jackson used to in the 70s. And they've got this urban activism, you know, the EDI, the ESG, it's everywhere. You know, environmentalism and social engineering is not and should not be part of our business model and our consumer and services sector economy. We should focus on that and that alone. The government is now pushing, and these businesses are now pushing, due to non-governmental organization, NGO compliance entities that are out there trying to coach and mentor and help society embrace this new far left agenda. Well, society doesn't want it. Middle America doesn't want it. All that flyover country that you LGBTQ activists from New York or California that you're peddling across America, we're not interested in it. We just want to focus on our American way of life, making a living, working hard so we can produce and feed America. Tractor Supply, your job is to provide supplies for agriculture in rural America. Not to be on this woke train, this progressive left woke train that you got on and went over the cliff, and now you're trying to get the train back on the track. And America and corporate America has not woken up, and we need a lot more people to speak up and speak out and say, we've had a belly full, stop the nonsense, and get it out of our lives in every aspect of our society. Christ almighty, we have it in schools now, down to first grade. We have it in our businesses now. We have it in corporate America. We have it in the services sector. We don't need it. America doesn't want it. You can have that. We're accepting. You know, be who you want to be in this country. But don't try to make everybody wear it like we're in Hawaii on vacation, like it's a big luau flower around our necks. Crying out loud, Jeff. When does it end? Well, now it's ending for Tractor Supply because they woke up and said, oh, this isn't working. We're losing money now. Yeah, y'all are going to lose more money if you don't listen. So let's knock it off. And you be part of that message, sir.
Well, you know, I wasn't born a rancher. I was born a country club kid. Now I'm literally a walking Alan Jackson song. I've gone country. But I got to tell you, it's a different lifestyle. It's a different culture. At the end of the day, people focus in on their work, right? Delivering a product for people, for their consumers, whether it's chickens or goats or cattle like you do, Richard, or it's about caring for their family and their community. And they don't like seeing the politics all into this. Richard, I'll give you a great example. I was at the rodeo over the weekend. The only flag that flew at the rodeo was the American flag. That was it. They are united under America. They don't want this division taking place in our country, and they're pushing back on companies. Richard, what's your final message here to corporations out there that do business with middle America?
Well, Jeff, my message would be, let's go back to being Americans first. We can be who we want to be. Get away from the tribalism. Get away from this radical left progressivism. It is not helping this country, and it's not helping the world. Live how you want to live. Be who you want to be. Dress how you want to dress. When you're an adult, if you want to spend a bunch of money, don't make the taxpayers spend their money for you. If you want to change the plumbing, go ahead. It's a free country. Go to the hardware store, get all new pipes and plumbing, and go for it. Maybe Tractor Supply can help you there. I don't know. But we don't need it. We want America first. We want America forever. And we want to be patriots and love our country. That pride flag, I agree. It should not be flying anywhere on a government building that's a federal building or a state building. It has a place. If you're proud of that flag, then fly it. It's a free country. But get it out of my face. And I will tell you, in our rodeos, we don't want it. In our parades, our 4th of July parades, for crying out loud, one of the most patriotic times in our country, we should rally around our country, our founding fathers, our independence, and the fact that I served in the military for 29 years, sir, and the woke military doesn't work. So Richard, get it out of the DOD.
Richard Holtforf, we're just out of time. Richard Holtforf, a Colorado State representative and rancher. Thanks for being on Jenna Ellis tonight. When we come back, Will Chamberlain is going to dive into the U.S. Supreme Court decision regarding Trump. You're not going to want to miss it. Stick around. Welcome to Jenna Ellis tonight. My name is Jeff Hunt, filling in for my good friend. I'm a radio host on the Salem Media Network in Denver, Colorado. Major U.S. Supreme Court decision today regarding Trump and presidential immunity. Check out this headline. Justices give presidents immunity for official acts, further delaying Trump's trial. This from the Washington Post. Former presidents are immune from prosecution for official actions taken while in the White House. The Supreme Court ruled on Monday, but do not have immunity for unofficial acts. The 6-3 ruling along ideological lines likely means that Donald Trump's federal trial could proceed in D.C., but only after additional delays. Joining me to provide commentary is Will Chamberlain, counsel at Article 3 Project. Will, what does this mean for President Trump?
It means that he's not going to face prosecution on anything for years, even if he, God forbid, loses the November election. The test set forth by the Supreme Court to bring a former president to trial for their official acts is going to be very stringent, and President Trump will have the opportunity to appeal any finding that the district court now makes. Basically, the Supreme Court said, if you're going to want to prosecute a president for things they did while they were in office, first you need to establish whether or not they were official or unofficial acts. And then if you find that they were official acts, you need to make a decision about whether the presumptive immunity is overcome. And the presumptive immunity can only be overcome if prosecuting a president for that act would not intrude on the functions of the executive branch. That's a really high bar. They're very unlikely to be able to meet it. So, none of this is going to get heard before the election in November. I mean, we're talking about, we have to have an evidentiary hearing at the district court level that immediately can be appealed by President Trump. So, we're talking years of litigation before this could ever see trial.
But Will, the left was making the argument that the president can now use Navy SEALs to go assassinate political opponents. Does this mean that they have unrestricted ability to do whatever they want as the president of the United States?
No, not at all. There wasn't absolute immunity established for all official acts, first and foremost. There's only presumptive immunity for the broader category of official acts. There's absolute immunity for things like the use of the pardon power, which is like an explicit grant of power in the Constitution to the president for these things that are still under the president's part of the president's job, but not these explicit grants of power, which could be thought of as the broader umbrella of things that the president does in his official capacity. That's where you have presumptive immunity. And what that ultimately means is that the president's not above the law, but it does mean that it's not easy to prosecute a former president for things they did while they're in office, and that a lot of the things that are in Jack Smith's indictment are going to get thrown out if and when this ever goes to trial.
Well, and to your point about constitutional powers, the legislative branch can still always impeach a president, right? If they don't like what he's doing, they believe what he's doing falls under high crimes and misdemeanors or is considered treasonous. They could bring articles of impeachment and go through that way. Is this, in your mind, a win for the separation of powers?
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely a win for the separation of powers and for the structure of our government. Our government was, originated after the Articles of Confederation, when you didn't have anything resembling an executive branch and the federal government couldn't do anything. That's why the Constitution was written, because of the weakness of the decentralized Articles of Confederation government. And throughout the Federalist Papers, if you read them, Hamilton, Madison, all of them talk about the need for an energetic executive capable of taking bold action with dispatch. And that's a way to secure our liberty, right? Like some things you have time to legislate about, but some things, you're in the middle of a war, you need urgent action, decisive action. The president needs to be able to do that. And a world where presidents are constantly looking over their shoulder, worried about if a future political opponent is going to prosecute them, that's a world that weakens the executive branch. And the opinion is very, very good explaining this problem that, the executive branch under the theory of the Democrats would end up cannibalizing itself. And really, who should be reassured by this opinion is honestly former President Obama and current President Biden, because in the absence, if this came out the other way and President Trump were to prevail in November, they could have both expected indictments in January for their official acts.
Yeah. And I don't think people wanted to go that direction with this country. The use of lawfare, right? We're seeing Steve Bannon go to prison today. The use of lawfare against political opponents is something that the American people don't like, and they make it akin to bullying. Will Chamberlain, counsel at Article 3 Project, I'll give you the final word real quick.
Yeah, lawfare is really bad for our country. We shouldn't unilaterally disarm, obviously. Like if the Democrats are going to do it to us, we need to be willing to do it to them. But I think we should all see it as a good thing when the Supreme Court steps in and puts an end to it, even if it restricts our options.
Will Chamberlain, counsel at Article 3 Project, thanks so much for joining us. My name's Jeff Hunt. It's been an honor to fill in for my friend Jenna Ellis on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Until next time, God bless you and yeehaw.